Hi, my name's Andrew Greenfield, and I'm an IBM Global Engineer, and I wanted to say thanks for coming to this particular session of IBM Tech U. This one is going to be all about ransomware and beating malware, how you can avoid being the next cyber victim, as well as being a hero to preventing that, not only for yourself, but also for other companies that you work for or the vendors that you support. Now, all of this is available inside the IBM Tech U portal, as well as on my public box link. Feel free to reach out to me as well. I'll be glad to do one-on-one or deeper dives with you or your security folks or any of the other teams. I focus on storage and security for IBM for the last 10 years, and I've written a bunch of books about it as well. Now, speaking of which, some other folks that have always been very contributory and very helpful, my IBM colleagues, Brian Sherman and Barry White. Barry White is a master inventor, and Brian Sherman is a distinguished engineer. They also have Tech U sessions, and they also have a lot of stuff on social media as well as myself that's useful. Feel free to reach out to any of them as well as check out their sessions. Now, let's talk about something that I can do for you immediately. If you're an IBM business partner, if you're an IBM customer, simply be one of the first 5 to write to me at andrewjg@us.ibm.com, as you can see on screen, and I'll be glad to send you any one of these prizes. That's right, one prize, please. So yes, when you email me, let me know your thoughts about this presentation. And of course, if it's a shirt or a clothing item, let me know the shipping address, your telephone number, and of course, a USA shirt size. But otherwise, socks, a weekend duffel bag, as well as an analog notebook, shirts, and even the waterproof jacket, because other places in the world have rain. Now, let's talk about a mindset change. We're in a place right now where the bad guys are working 24/7 with their automatic tools that are looking for exploits. They're looking for ways to get in and do havoc, because that's how they make their money. And so they have many automatic systems that are not enforced by any legal means from their countries to try to get any Bitcoin or force any other payment to their particular bank accounts. So that means, let's listen up, application developers, look at your code, architect your code for security with documentation and verify it. There's been quite a few hacks where a contractor entered an entity with the sole purpose of changing the actual code and point of sale devices that would take effect after he left the entity's particular employment. In other words, he was there, he did his job, he left some time bombs, and they went out after he left and profited his real culprit's employer's bank account by transferring money out. Business owners, that's right, you write the checks. Insist on security lifecycle management as part of your application for your end customers. That means that the supply chain vendors you use for code or for the products that support your application should equally be transparent and or be able to verify their code on a regular basis. I can't forget my heart and blood of the network team. That's right. Please, every packet on the network, use your automatic tools to start looking for unusual activity and watch for anything off hours as well. Now, I come from the storage and backup community. Of course, please, all of us admins, we should be looking for data changes on our volumes, our snapshots, as well as talking with the application developers on a regular basis. Hey, are you making any changes to the application? Now, if the application owners are encrypted already, then I need even more communication so I can then look for different changes and patterns. Because if it's encrypted at the application or OS level, it makes it difficult to find out the change rate or the early warnings on my side. But still, better communication across all the departments is a key, and basically being paranoid and not trusting anyone or anything. Storage is the base. That's right. I come from the storage, so I'm always looking up at everyone above me. I got the network, I've got the application owners, and I've got the operating system folks. Anyone and everyone, it all comes down to the recovery point objective. In other words, how much can we lose, as well as how long can we be offline, or the recovery time objective. Once you have these conversations with the application owners, you'll know what process to actually take to make sure you aren't attacked, or if you are attacked, that you have protections and remediations so you can recover at a very fast rate. There's a checklist for this, and we'll go into more details in a few slides. Stay tuned. First and foremost, from the backup and application side, I can find out early warnings based on the deduplication rates or the compression rates, because maybe the data is becoming encrypted by a malware or ransomware attack, as well as being overwritten. So that's the key thing. Backups are a very key early warning. Now there's lots of different ways to do this. IBM Spectrum Protect has early warnings built into it. You might have another backup product. You might have several different backup products. All of them should be leveraged and report into a security incident event monitor or some similar security database for your entities. Now, we've talked about a lot of different things about how to prevent malware or ransomware. One of the most exciting things is what's called FIDO, and FIDO 2, by the way, or the Fast ID Online. Now, this is an open environment done by an alliance. When it's open and secure, it's part of W3C, and I've got some of the biggest players in the industry, including Google, who are using it. And why are we talking about this? Passwords are only good up to a certain point. And that's why treasure maps and pirates all had limitations. We need to get past that for the next decade. So by getting around passwords, by using biometrics, and I'll go into this in a little bit, by using other factors for authentication, we'll be able to encrypt and keep secure the company's most important assets, its data, as well as your own personal data. Now let's talk about what that means. Sure, you can still use passwords and usernames, but that is a fallacy and a weakness for the prior decades. Let's go into the next level where we're using application code and we're using on-device authenticators like USB keys, like a watch, like a phone, like a fingerprint. All of those are available using a multi-factor authentication and this very secure algorithm, which takes a look at rethinking authentication and, shall we say, entry into a secure environment or a secure area. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We are the base. So storage admins out there, please do not become passive. The opposite. Please become active. Between backups on tape, which has been out for decades, as well as other storage arrays, we can process all of that known good data and keep it safe from the bad guys, especially by using tape, which is the cheapest storage medium out there, as well as other storage devices. We can actually take good copies of that data and make sure it's available in case of a ransomware or malware attack and being able to recover that. Now, I have a storage deck that goes into futures about this as well. Feel free to check out that session. It's called Storage Futures by my name as well, Andrew Greenfield. So please do not just say, I'm just a storage engineer and I can encrypt stuff. I can encrypt the snaps of replication and air gaps. Because even with air gaps, and you'll see this with some other slides later on, we are not safe. Making extra copies and making those copies immediately available as well as immutable is the key. I'm always asked this. I'm on many PMRs and crit sits. Being an IBM global engineer, my phone rings all the time, helping out with attacks and problems from a storage perspective. Here's the biggest one that's underrepresented. What is that? Users don't click on attachments. Many of the cyber attacks simply started when a user, he or she, clicked on the wrong attachment and fell into it. Their machine became very much compromised, and the attackers immediately got a foothold, if not a gateway, into the rest of the network. And that means from either the phone or a computer or a smart device became compromised, and the attackers used that as their entryway into the bigger network by finding out passwords, by then being able to harvest all those logistics in terms of what servers, what other passwords, what other sites, etc. So this means also for your subcontractors or your vendors. Please, this is a key item. Don't click on attachments unless you're absolutely certain. Number 2, we have found a lot of different things on the X-Force exchange, as well as other good security places that you can subscribe to become aware of future and bad malware actors and their actions. And that is bad domains. So the network guys, I am reaching out to you especially on this one, because in case a user clicks on the wrong attachment or in case they go to a wrong place, we can prevent that bad place from even attaching to your network by blocking those bad domains. Yes, this is going to be an ongoing item because there's always bad guys finding new ways to circumnavigate and using bad domains, but this is not a bad way to actually prevent something from happening by blocking it at the network layer. It's now a matter of when. I've mentioned this earlier in some other of my talks, and it's useful that there's lots of different sites that talk about a live attack, and they'll show you the live attack because this is the best way to change your behavior. And that's what this is all about, this entire presentation. If we change our mindset and processes, we'll get around this cyber attack and malware that's been affecting global companies. On the upper left, you see that we have war games. That's right, when it used to be just a simple matter of a phone call coming into a computer and guessing the right password. We're not that anymore. With the Internet of Things, everything's connected, and there's so many different, unfortunately, loopholes into complex systems. And if I could, please, no matter when you're reading this, watching this, or consuming this content, realize that the bad guys love vacations. That's when everyone usually takes a break, and systems, those automatic systems that we love near and dear, become even more vulnerable because when they report an attack, when they report something's wrong, people might not be available to take immediate actions on those reports. So please, by all means, and from our friends at Akamai, who do a global content delivery network, that's when a lot of the attacks happen and people aren't able to take actions and remediate those infections. So let's talk about how to build a defense. Again, we have lots of different checklists, lots of different agencies that are trying to help us on this. NIST has this, and you'll see that very soon. Pretty much, I want you to think about what you need to do to prevent a complete business catastrophe. Is that email? Is that a database? What are your crown jewels? And then, how can I watch those crown jewels being accessed? In other words, what is an authorized user? What's authorized and what's not? How do I make sure, and what processes can I tighten down, including updating my software, updating my application, updating my operating system, updating my firmware on various devices. There's lots of ways and lots of different avenues, attack vectors we like to say, that we can take a look at. And last but not least, in case this all doesn't make sense, ask yourself the last easy question. How long can your business survive if you're offline? Could it survive at all? That will dictate the other two in terms of budgets as well as process changes so that you can recover no matter how critical your business needs are and some of those data. Now, IBM has another thing that we've been talking about for at least the last 10 years. We call it cyber resiliency. We've had it available on our mainframe and our Z, and now because of recent events, we're doing it on the open system as well. We're basing everything on NIST, or the National Institute of Storage and Technology in the United States, and it's a real simple process. We've talked about it earlier in this slide deck, but I'm making sure everyone hears it. You identify the weaknesses. We look at ways to protect it, ways to detect in those processes, ways we're going to respond, and then ways we're going to recover. And these are all the high-level, easy cheat sheets that you can do for any of your businesses as well as yourself to make sure you can protect what's most important to you, your data, your lifestyle, your business. Now, let's talk about the repair firms. Believe it or not, there's a whole bunch now of Google ads who are trying to profit on false or misleading pop-ups as well as offering to protect you against cyberware or ransomware. And these people are themselves the scammers. In other words, people who are trying to fix a printer, people who are worried about cyber ransomware, they're clicking on some of the ads in Google, and they look like they're good ads, but they're actually individuals and entities that will place the malware and ransomware on your devices and get things worse. They're texting phones, they're taking out ads on Google, they're actually cold calling. And some of the really good ones have wonderful, soothing voices to make sure that you feel so entrusted to give them your passwords or to give them access to your most trusted networks. So please, if it is not a valid Fortune 500 listed company, and you can validate that in many other ways, don't trust a text or a pop-up or some of those ads that you might see. I wanted to make sure I drill this home. This came through on a bunch of different exploits. So even if you are an entity that should know better, for example, take a look at the ad in the upper left. It looks like an ad for Home Depot. Yet it actually transferred customers or clients who clicked on it into a very nasty malware situation before it got them into the homedepot.com. So as an entity, your reputation is at stake when some of the scammers or the bad actors are using your name as a clickbait to try and get ransomware or malware onto some of your customers before they even get to your real web presence. So again, please, it's useful to not only protect your immediate assets, your internal assets, but also looking outside on various different search engines and everything else to make sure that others aren't trying to circumnavigate your best security, as well as protecting your customers from being taken advantage of. Now, I brought up this earlier. I want to bring out the point of sale devices. Some of the biggest hacks that happened in terms of monetary, shall we say, redirection of funds happened at Target as well as Neiman Marcus, UPS, and Home Depot, where the bad guys reprogrammed low-lying code in the point of sale devices so that every swipe of their cards went a cent or a few cents, if you saw Superman 3, to a different financial device, or in this case, financial outlet. So the bad guys would actually skim payments from customers in various stores to their own nefarious means. This is a key thing. So this happened from an internal attack where the POCs or the point of sale devices were actually reprogrammed from within. Please be aware of this so that all of your groups, no matter if it's an operating system, a point of sale device, your finance groups, your supply chains, they are very well checked and monitored for such a internal redirection attack. Now, for those in the medical side, you're constantly hosting people. You're using internet devices in a public facility like X-ray machines, MRI machines, guest networks, for example, Starbucks. Make sure that those networks don't have any rogue devices on them. Make sure that those devices can't talk to your key crown jewels, for example, mainframes or various other databases that should be locked away from various customer entities. I've said it before, this is not trying to get away from it, but not only are we the base, all of our storage guys, but air gaps themselves did nothing to prevent these particular attacks, and they're still out there. Now, I provided links to everything in the end of this presentation, so I need you to think a lot more of process. So even if you do have air gaps, even if you do have tape and off-site tapes and many versions of different tapes out there, for example, so you can go back years, decades, if you want, I want to make sure you're all set that sooner or later you might have something that goes across that inadvertently corrupts that. So please, by all means, take a look and don't believe that just air gapping your network or air gapping your storage arrays is the only. Immutable, archived, write once, read many copies is one of the only ways to step up and lead, because at least those copies of your data, even though they're outdated, even though they might be older, are the only way to prevent the corruption that you're trying to prevent, as well as being able to restart in a timely fashion. I mentioned it earlier. What we're talking about is that business email compromise. How, especially if you are a C-level individual, if you are a director level individual, they are using LinkedIn, they're using Facebook, they're finding a very targeted group of people to try to send very good looking emails so that you'll inadvertently click on a text or anything like that, so they'll get a foothold into your environment so they can then launch attacks in your name saying, oh, blah, 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 would you transfer X amount of funds to such and such an account? Oh, I need you to buy 5,000 units of this from this particular supplier who you haven't ever used before. It's called the business email compromise. And by the way, as part of this, the FBI report is available as part of my download for this presentation, so you can actually see this in more detail. We're going to go through some more in just a few seconds. What does this look like? Spear phishing is one of the terms where it actually looks like a particular executive is trying to do something and it's legitimate. He or she might have actually just been compromised, yet once they're compromised, all those passwords allow them to be, shall we say, replicated as the bad guys. So the bad guys will send emails or they'll try to take actions as that particular individual in that organization. So please, always verify. And as my friends in Israel like to say, trust but verify. So please, an email is not just an email anymore, no matter where it comes from. All right, let's take a look at this. Look at the difference between PayPal A on the left and PayPal B on the right. One is real, one is fake. So it's not just even the most trusted sites. You have to watch activity and then make sure, for example, in this case, about secure certificates. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll see that one is obviously the real PayPal, the one on the left. You can see that icon with the green icon that it's actually legitimate, back to PayPal. But look, the one on the right looks secure, but it's really not. It's using a different certificate than really PayPal. So if you're not paying attention, you might inadvertently, on your way to PayPal, give the bad guys your credentials so they can empty you out. So this is both for internal sites as well as external sites, even the ones that you're doing business with on a daily basis. Please, security certificates are important. Pay attention. Now, for those who are unfortunately hacked and those who have to report as a public or a compliance situation, some of the folks have actually hidden how badly they were hacked, and entities then took that as a penalty. So by all means, if you're hacked, if you're suspecting of a cyber thing, reach out to the FBI, reach out to the various authorities, reach out to IBM and X-Force, reach out to myself. The sooner we can actually take a look at your environment and understand the damage so you can report accurately, the better off everything's going to be. Please don't try to hide it. Please don't try to use any subterfuge. It's only going to get worse. Now, I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to bring it up again. Now that we're using the smartphone as literally a mini computer and the vector into all different areas of your enterprise, it's also the most susceptible. Inadvertently, you can actually trigger off viruses that'll then get copied to your computer, copied to your network, infect your entire series or systemics of the databases, you name it. Please, if your phone can access it, then so can the attackers. So that's why a lot of folks shouldn't have a lot of apps on their corporate phone, because those are vectors. So by all means, please treat your corporate phone or a phone that has access to any of your corporate crown jewels or data as an unwilling accomplice for the bad guys. And I need you to be very careful with it. Now, one of the things that came up that we're still trying to lock down is what's called a SIM swap. Let's say you're the best executive ever and you don't let your phone use for anything else. You have a strong password. You have assistants and other administrators who are watching and helping out, filter out your emails as well as what's getting to you and what you're authorized. That's great. Inadvertently, a SIM swap is where somebody has found out your phone and called up the phone company saying, oh my gosh, I lost my phone. Can you immediately help me replace it? And so, meanwhile, the real executive or the real director or person, their phone simply goes back into an SOS mode where their phone will do dial out of emergency numbers. But meanwhile, the bad guys have reprogrammed their SIM on their phone to impersonate the director or the original person's, and they're busily resetting all the passwords because those passwords will go back to the new phone, the bad guy's phone, instead of the old or the real person's phone. That's what's called SIM swap. So please pay attention to your phone, and if you see it to go into SOS mode or something like that, immediately contact your telco to make sure that they realize that you've been hacked on a SIM swap. Now, the perfect key. Is it just one vector? No, it's not. So that's part of the reason why I mentioned about FIDO and using biometrics. So it's not just your phone as a second vector for a password, that you use either, for example, multi-levels of passwords or answering questions or fingerprints. There's lots of different ways to do it. Please, multi-factors is the key thing, not just your phone. Recently, our friends in Pegasus, they sold a lawful kit that accessed the deepest secrets of both iOS and Android devices. Now, they're still out there, and they're still selling it to various nation states. That's right, and not all those nation states are on our happy side. They're open to, shall we say, malware and infecting people, because for them, getting any financial payment is good. For example, North Korea. There's lots of folks out there that are using a lot of these kits that are available publicly and for free to hack your phone or emails, and it's 24/7. So please, there's no better time than the present to make sure you start distrusting texts, emails, and anything else, because bad things can happen. And that includes, again, installing various different apps on your phone. Please, back to the other one, don't install any apps unless you absolutely positively have to and you know what it's there for, if that phone is going to be a corporate phone. If it's your personal phone and you don't worry about any of your personal data, by all means, feel free. But there's been numerous hacks of bad apps in the iOS store as well as the Android store. Now, you'd say to me, okay, Andrew, I believe you. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. What happens if you're using the smart devices and voice recognition? Believe it or not, there's a hack, an ultrasound. Now, I've been a cinephile for a long time. And so what I've also realized is that we have what's called ultrasonic speakers. For those who've gone to various Disney properties or other museums, you might not have even been aware that you heard an ultrasonic speaker. Now, what does that mean? An ultrasonic speaker uses ultrasound, or waves we normally can't hear until they actually hit our body. When they hit our body, especially the upper torso, it becomes sound, and our eardrums immediately make it sound as if it's spoken to us. Well, the same thing happens to phones. So theoretically, from over a football field away, I can actually use an ultrasonic speaker aimed at people's phones, and using Google or Alexa or Siri, issue commands, and the phone will respond as if you yourself were talking into the phone. Believe it. Now, by the way, this is real life and something that you can turn off by turning off the voice recognition features of your phone. I know, or your smart devices. I know you don't want to do it. But if that device has corporate access, you might strongly want to reconsider having that voice prompting. Now, there's lots of different attack vectors. That's why I'm trying to get you in a process and behavior mindset so you can take lots of different remediation steps to prevent any of this stuff. So even our friends at iOS, Apple, and of course Android, the apps were infected themselves, not just once, but many times. And more recently, I've been a big proponent of using your own cable for years. Now it actually has hit the Amazon store that there's now bad cables that the bad guys are selling, and there's a chip inside the actual connector. So if you use one of their bad cables, the bad actor within a half a mile away can literally connect into your phone or your computer because it's already inside the decrypted process. I'm going to say that again. So inadvertently, by using someone else's cable, by using a public access cable that might be lying around the airport, or you inadvertently buying a cheap cable on Amazon, the chip inside that USB connector or that lightning connector could inadvertently be broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal to some bad actor within a mile, and they're getting all of your data mirrored to their own device. You wouldn't even know that you were being hacked, even though you are hacked. You would know nothing. Now, IBM makes a lot of different products and services. Mainframe is one of our most secure, but it's not immune. Again, it goes back to process and mindset and bad behaviors. So I'm providing some interesting things about Z as well. So Z administrators out there, please, by all means, there's ways to lock down your Z. Here's some of them. And of course, you can be hijacked with encryption the same way. The key manager itself can be hijacked. Whoa! Your most secure wallet that handles all your keys could be hijacked itself. So please, by all means, there's lots of ways to remediate Z and prevent the key manager itself from being hijacked. And what does that mean? It means we look at your Z environment just the way we look at any network or any open system. We take a look at the network, we look at the applications, we make sure they're in a strong walled garden, strong passwords, and strong access controls. No one needs to be root or a super user and everything like that. And we use the crypto cards. We use a lot of the crypto facilities that are built into Z. Yes, that's right. In case you didn't know, Z has a lot of cryptography built into it. So it has an extra layer of security, not only at the processing level, the application level, the storage level, as well as the network level. There's many different points, and that's why I'm trying to focus on lots of different ones. So now back to my friends in the database, the application. There's what's called the poison macros. In other words, this is a macro or a trigger that you can put inside an application so that it doesn't affect the OS, but it actually changes the data inside the application itself. The only way to avoid all this is to make sure you have a very good team that's constantly checking themselves. Now, I have one customer, very paranoid, and I love them for it. Then on a monthly basis, they have 2 different database teams, 2 different programs, and they constantly swap data, checking each other. And by that means they have an Oracle and they have a SQL side, and they're constantly checking each other by doing database exports. And that division of labor also is one of their key checkpoints. In other words, that in case somebody is doing a bad thing on the Oracle side or a bad actor on the Oracle side, the SQL guys can catch it during that monthly remediation. So it also comes down to the actual host. We can talk about buffer manipulations inside an application, inside the operating system, inside the host. Again, it comes down, if X device can access the crown jewels, your data, so can the attackers. It all comes down to behavior. It really does. So by watching behavior, we can actually have another early warning. That's right. We talked about the business email compromise. Inadvertently, you've clicked on something. Maybe you've connected to the wrong cable, etc. Once we actually see bad activity and those behaviors, those actions, we can then take actions to stop all this. So the key thing is not just assuming that we have an impenetrable castle by using firewalls or anything like that. We need to make sure our firewall is watching internal network, that the application is watching for bad actions. Why is this person deleting all these files? Why is this person accessing all these files when he or she never did? The patches for your operating system and firmware themselves are critical. In other words, when you download patches or firmware for any of your devices, network, application, I can guarantee you that most of our important supply chain vendors are providing a checksum, those MD5 checksums. Are you using them? Are you mandating that you check before you apply those binary patches? Please do. That is another key vector. Let's talk about what IBM can do just for a second. I mean, I know where I get my paycheck from. So not only at IBM do we have Z, we talked about that a little bit, we have numerous other software options for both our hardware as well as our software products. Safeguarded copies has been around for a long time on the Z side, and we've also brought it open for the open system. And that's where we're actually taking immutable snapshots. Remember I talked about that earlier. But instead of going to tape, it's actually putting it in a special place inside the box, or you could actually take them to another replicated box as well. So you don't have to put it to tape necessarily. We can actually electronically take those safeguarded copies, make them read-only, so that way we also have a known good at a particular point in time. Now we also have Spectrum Copy Data Management to help manage this. And please, if you haven't heard anything else I've said, tape. Why? Because tape's very cheap, at less than half a cent per gig. That's right. Not even a full penny, half a cent per gig, if not better, depending on your tape. And last but not least, subscribe or be a part of various security infrastructures like QRadar or Xthreat or other services out there, because that'll help you. And that doesn't mean to forget about your cloud and using the cloud-based security services as well. IBM has what's called a resiliency orchestration. We call it the Cyber Incident Recovery for Data. So this is another process that looks at all of your particular entities and helps you remediate as well as put in preventions with air gaps, with the copy data management, as well as many point-in-time copies. Now, I'm trying to stay away from products and focus more on the process because there's a lot of different products out there. Now, we've talked about air gaps, but I want to make sure you understand what an air gap really means. Is that theoretically, wherever that data is, that I have made another copy of it that can't be communicated directly from that network. In other words, it's on tape that's physically outside the data center, that's not able to be touched or written to in any way, shape, or form, and the tape itself can only be read back, that the tape itself can't be overwritten. Now, let's go back to some other really cool early warning systems. We talked about checksums before for all of your firmware, for all of your applications, for storage, including your phones. That's right. Checksums are important. Apple uses them as well. Audit all of your updates. That's right. So even inside your database pages, which is where I'm focusing on right here, you can audit and make sure that you're watching users as well as activities on the database as well as other applications, and you're looking for early warning signs of improper access as well as unusual write activity to be able to say, hey, wait a second, is this behavior I need to stop? Let's take a look at it from the Oracle side. I brought up about applications and databases, and I'm going to go a little deeper just on the Oracle just for a second. I'll audit my Oracle code using this particular process right here by using an auditing table and then looking at that to try to track changes as well as looking at various different nefarious activities. Oh, hey, let's take a look at this from a different one. Oh, is everyone here about a U.S. bank? Yeah, great. Take a look. They had a contractor inadvertently provision storage wrong, created a 6-hour outage on key servers. Again, could this have been prevented with better training? That's right. Better behavior, better training, better early warning signs could have prevented a 6-hour outage. Let's talk now SQL. We talked about Oracle. I'm now going to go on to SQL. Again, the same thing. Anyone who's a contractor or a temporary should be looked at from an auditing standpoint, as well as making sure you have an audit table inside your key critical databases so I can watch activities as well as behaviors and track back in case something happens. Now, to my friends at the network, I have my Cisco certifications. I got them starting in high school because I believe that the future is still a connected world. And yes, networks, no matter if it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever you want, let alone the good old Ethernet RJ45 wires or fiber optic, you need to make sure every packet is valid. And not only valid, but at least authorized and authenticated properly. So it's not just the firewall, it's not just the outside, it's also the inside as entities inside your organization access resources. Intrusion detection is what we're talking about because it also can look at various different entities inside your network to make sure that, for example, your firewall is doing its job, as well as your application servers are not launching an attack on other users or they've been compromised. We talked about wireless and we talked about air gap. Take a look at how air gap can be compromised here. This is by our friends, the CIA. They were able to get around air gaps. That's right. Using that happy little device, a USB key, they got access to a data center and they plugged it in. Now you could say, hey, I don't have a data center, I'm all cloud. That's great. Perfect. But maybe they'll be getting around that by hacking some of your passwords, hacking some of your encrypted key managers. Anything's possible, including Wi-Fi hacks. So don't think that your Wi-Fi is secure by itself. I've already shown you about cables being hacked. Wi-Fi itself has numerous other vulnerabilities. And for those who like to say, oh, but optical cables can't be hacked. Oh, no, it can be. You can hack an optical cable in just minutes with the right access. And that would be a clear and easy drain of all of your key data points from a known database or from your financial systems. Think about it. Now, this is one of the most recent hacks that Microsoft brought up. We thought Internet Explorer or Explorer was done a long time ago. It's not. It's still there in a lot of various different HTML documents that might be attached to an email. So by all means, I don't care if you're using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, be careful of those applications. Make sure you're up to date. Don't click on any attachments from emails because inadvertently, some of those Word attachments, some of those PowerPoint attachments, some of those Excel documents might not have even a macro or anything like that, but they might have some bad commands even, not even a full macro, that would subvert your computer and your credentials and immediately give the bad guys a foothold in your data center and inside your entire network. And this is actually in the last few weeks. Microsoft is still working on a remediation plan. Here's how we can get better. Hardware can break, but hopefully we improve it over time. Software always can get better. And you're right, writing it securely is never going to be an easy thing. Take a look. We're under time pressures to deliver new features, to make sure bugs are squashed. And again, back to the thing, adding new features, making it easier and fun for users and your end clients to use or your other end users. So I get it. writing the code securely is something you should take as job number one, because that way it'll make downstream, the network guy, the storage guy, the business owner sleep well at night, because the code itself is more, shall we say, impenetrable to the hackers. So they won't be able to put in a poisoned or hidden trigger that would result in a huge catastrophic attack. So one of those is just simple evil HTML. This is still out there today. What does this do? It basically is, on some of the easy websites, code that redirects various passwords or credentials to the bad guys. What does that look like? So internal sites as well as external sites can inadvertently, their web servers, be hacked, where they put in just a little bit of code that, even though the site itself stays up, the evil HTML code is taking those credentials, watching those keystrokes, and sending them outside the organization. That's why watching behavior, watching those packets, watching the code, and auditing the code, auditing those behaviors is critical to see if bad traffic is leaving somewhere else, or if the website's acting a little differently or improperly. It's critical. I mentioned about behavior, and here it is yet again. It's all about user activity and the threats. Now, one of the other vendors out there that did this really early on, and I helped install this at a lot of large Hollywood concerns, is what's called Varonis. And what did it do? It actually did the same thing that real Mother Nature does. It would watch every user and where that user was in the Active Directory scope, whether they were HR or finance, or whether they were engineering, and what files they would touch on a daily basis. And when they started to do things outside the norm, that's when Varonis would actually say, hey, wait a second, this isn't right. And it's all based on the file ACLs, or access control lists. And we have the same thing here in our own Mother Nature, our own immune system. Inadvertently, think about this. When we take in food, when we take in water, when we even breathe, we have the inability, or I should say, we have the ability to resist an attack. Think about that. With every breath you take, and I don't mean to be like a bad police song here, you are inhaling things which might not be good for you, let alone what you're eating. And yes, our body can take a look at this and launch an immune response. Now, this isn't something I'm bringing up just because of COVID or anything like that, but the same method that works for Mother Nature, we need to do for our technology systems as well. We have to assume that attackers are going to get in, and we need to be able to then watch for early warning signs and launch a remediation or an immune response. So we've talked about some of those. The auditing, basically saying, hey, is this valid? Is this right? Is this good activity? Because that's exactly what Mother Nature is doing. Immediately after you start getting sick, it's because your immune system is launching a fight. And if it doesn't have the right tools, that's when bad outcomes happen. I'm sorry about that for those who've had some bad outcomes in the last few years. But this is the reason why we have drugs, as well as other things, to help our own immune system. And that's the same thing we can do in technology. We can throw really good technology, behaviors, and processes to help stop a real cyber attack. And it all comes back to behavior. And yes, so please, for those operating system administrators out there, for the security people out there, watching the access control list is another good early warning. If someone's accessing files that they shouldn't be, if someone is doing things to files at an unprecedented rate that they normally haven't been, if there's not a change control for why a certain user is trying to delete files or trying to write so many files normally to a place they normally don't, please, that is part of the behavior which we can actually start stopping. Where are those tools? We've had these for decades. Syslog, Tripwire, Snort. We've got these for hypervisors for Windows. We've got it for VMware. We've got lots of different ways so we can watch for early warnings of your particular environment. No matter which layer of the ecosystem you are, there's tools that you can start, and free tools, to start auditing behavior and making sure you have early warnings to unusual activity so you can stop it in its tracks. I said this earlier, but here it is in print. Security, information, and event management. Now, IBM has QRadar. This is basically, why not focus on a database that's meant to look at all security events? That's right, from the firewalls, from the network devices, the routers, the switches, the VPNs, the servers, the actual applications, end users and their phones. All of those are now able to generate tremendous amounts of logs. Now, a real person or a real team can't go through all those logs by themselves, so let's use a SIEM to actually process the noise and get rid of and show us only the signal. That's right. So I'm using a little bit more engineering terms. With all those logs, with all those millions of events that can happen depending on how big your environment is, a database can help filter out and remediate immediately by saying, hey, wait a second, this is a real signal I want you to take a look at. So by the way, I'm also going to stop this and this and this by taking these actions. So think strongly about getting one of these products. Splunk is another one, and there's lots of other ones out there that can automatically take a look at all the logs and then do immediate steps to at least stop an attack and flag for a real administrator, real person, to take a look at those events and either let it continue or take further steps to make sure it doesn't happen. I mentioned earlier Varonis, and I want to give them credit for this. They were one of the first ones out there that did user profiling from ACLs. It watches the Active Directory and then builds up a nice baseline of normal activity. And when someone goes outside that activity, and again from the Hollywood side, they would watch and then say, okay, this person should be going to so-and-so, and they'll stop the access. They'll actually disable the login. Think about that. Now, some of those other vendors out there, I want to give credit. Logarithm, of course, Splunk's out there. We've got lots of other folks, and don't forget my friends. I used to work for them as well. EMC, there's lots, and I have a hot link for all of these. Feel free. The best part, a lot of these vendors will give you a free 30-day trial, and I guarantee you, please, if you don't do anything else after this presentation, make sure you try a 30-day trial of any one of these products if you don't have them already. You'll be amazed at what they discover of bad behavior, even if it's legitimate, but that you could easily tighten down and lock down and prevent going forward. That's right. You can get a 30-day trial of most of these devices, especially for QRadar, and you'll be amazed at what you start seeing. The key thing is then to take those actions and letting the SIEM actually use its intelligence to at least take some remediation, disabling a login, for example, or stopping a delete action. Now, please, for the operating system folks out there, for our main super users, I get it. We have to be super users sometimes, but there's a way you can actually remediate all this. So please, by all means, if you're engineering, if you're in a database, you should be segmented from the other parts of your entity, your ecosystem, just for basic security so that bad guys can't get carte blanche access from one other point. In other words, they should be isolated. So in case there's an infection in the database group, it won't transfer all the way to the firewall guys or to the financial guys. Please, by all means, not only yank root, but think about isolation. And as part of isolation, let's talk about jump boxes. A lot of my financial guys love jump boxes because that way, in case a device like a phone or a local computer inadvertently gets infected, it can't pass that infection on to a jump host or even a series of jump hosts. These are what's called remote desktops, for example, so that's another way of doing it. But theoretically, any one of these, along with FIDO and a passwordless or some biometrics, multi-factor, is a great way of stopping infection. This would be the same way of, I hate to bring it up, in case you have a really nasty infection, and instead of amputating the leg, this is a way of saving the leg and making sure that the rest of your body doesn't die because of that horrible infection. Last but not least, please, I've mentioned a lot of things about behavior, but Edward Snowden, one of my heroes, by the way, brought this up. Social engineering. No matter how many tools, no matter how many automatic processes, or even AI, Watson, Google, Alexa, Siri, no matter what you want to throw at it, someone might inadvertently give away the fort or their credentials just because they hear a soothing voice or because they got a email that they thought was from someone they trusted. So please, I need you to start being a little bit more paranoid, a little bit more distrustful. So if you get an email, if you get a phone call them back on a regular number. Make sure that it's published. Make sure it's really the desired intent for the individual that's asking you to do something. Trust but verify, please. And last but not least, I bring this up because when I was 6, my mom gave me that book. And it's still true to this day. Nobody listens to me sometimes, but I'm pleased. If you don't remember anything else from this, remember this one point, because people inherently trust, and that's a good thing. It's a great thing about humanity. But I need you, especially now with cyber warfare being so elevated, that you take an extra level of distrust before you take actions that might jeopardize your personal data as well as your corporate data. Practice this. As a career lifeguard and water safety instructor, every year I practice saving lives, and that actually saved me. When I actually had to save 3 kids from drowning, that training came into amazing play. If you're a medical person, of course, you know about ACLS and advanced training that you do over and over every year. Repetition includes for our friends, the pilots in the airwaves. Everyone who actually does critical items should repeat that training, as well as the cyber aware training that we're talking about, the distrust, the paranoia, to make sure that we don't give away the keys or the fort to anyone. It can come from Apple, it can come from Android, it can come from anywhere. So no matter what walk of life you are, you already train to be your best. Do the same from an electronic standpoint as well, so that you don't inadvertently do something, and always test and test again. Now, here's one thing that some people have thought about. Why not do a honeypot? Now, if you're an old person like myself and you've read Mad Magazine, you know all about honeypots, where you actually try to trick somebody, and if they're going to attack you, why not attack a dummy file, a dummy server, or a dummy target? So some folks have made sure that they make sure their servers are labeled with easy names like Oracle 1, SQL 1, and those are the honeypots, which have no data whatsoever, so the attackers would go after those. And meanwhile, your early warning systems are going through the roof, because all of a sudden those attackers are doing all of their nasty attacks, and you know that no one should be on them. You know that everyone else who's really part of your organization shouldn't be using those honeypots at all, so you can immediately track back those bad guys. Think about it. Now, some people get really angry. I know. I get angry too, because I hear about this all the time, and I want to take actions against those folks. But depending on where you live in the world, you might actually be attacked as well as reprimanded and put in jail for going after the bad guys. Believe it or not, we had a very interesting individual who was protecting U.S. government secrets at Sandia National Labs. He tracked back the bad guys, and unfortunately, the U.S. government took him to court because he took down some bad guys. That's right. He attacked back, and he made sure those attackers couldn't do anything more and totally wiped out their systems, but he was guilty of a whole bunch of crimes that the attackers were able to prove were traced back to him, so he went to jail. So by protecting U.S. government secrets at one of our biggest labs, he actually went to jail for going after and getting rid of those attackers and getting back the secrets that they were attacking. Please, train, test, and retest. Never trust phone, email, business email compromises, those soothing voices. Limit the access. Remember, normal users should be able to get to wherever they need to, but then if they need to go super user or to anything else with sudo or other stuff, make sure there's a legitimate process that's not too arbitrary or cumbersome that they can then use, and that it's tracked so that we can actually make sure that we don't introduce bad elements. Look at all the vectors. Who, what, where, how. Physical as well as logical. And more importantly, that's why I put it in bold in the middle of the slide. If you don't remember anything else from the slide, enable the audits. Please, we have automatic tools that'll record things, and then we have automatic tools that'll then process those logs and look for patterns, look for bad things. Use them, please. Now, the other thing that I brought up earlier, and I just want to drill it back again, is using disparate systems. I have no problem saying it's great to be on one ecosystem. For example, I described earlier the Z ecosystem. Hey, if you get a Z, why not get IBM storage? Why not get IBM switches? I get it. You get a lot of great interaction as well as security that way. But there's also a point where you might want to consider having a backup system, a disparate system that's not part of that normal ecosystem, just as your fail-safe, just so that in case an attacker gets access to one series of systems, they are not able to get into the other one. In other words, back to the isolation part. And plan, plan, plan. Everything I've talked about should have you thinking about how you can help in your particular area, as well as talk to all your other individuals that you support. The business owners, the application owners, your storage teams that you work with. Please plan together so that we can work to prevent a cyber attack. Here's all those references. And by all means, the public link where this is at, my YouTube channel, my email address again. Last but not least, please complete the session evaluation. Let me and my managers know about what your thoughts are about all of this. I look forward to hearing from you and even seeing you soon. Thanks again.